Okay. Good morning, Valley Vikings. Today we have a very special guest, our very own Superintendent, Dr. Pollio. And today we're going to ask him some questions from our own Valley students and staff. I'm Lennox Smith, a junior.
I'm Benjamin King, a sophomore.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Pollio, for coming.
So excited to be here. Thank you for having me, and I love interviewing with you guys.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
So what would you miss most about JCPS?
Without a doubt, for me, the thing I would miss the most is interacting with kids on a regular basis. I mean, I was a principal for 10 years in high school, 20 years in high schools in JCPS. I miss interacting with kids, knowing kids' names, going to games after school, all the things that you do in a high school. I miss that a lot. I've come to love elementary schools. So I'd never been in elementary school, but I love going in elementary schools now and interacting with young kids and seeing the crazy questions they ask me, which is always fun. So I think by far the thing I'm going to miss the most is interacting with students and really getting to see the impact that the work you have at central office and being it's hard work. It really is. And so sometimes you forget about what's actually happening in a school, but to be able to come into a school, I do that on Fridays, and to see the impact the work is having on kids, just to see like you're all set up here and the work. This is like you all are doing really important work here and real world work that clearly I think you enjoy, and I think getting to see this makes is the best thing for me about the job and the thing I'll miss the most.
Thank you. I would appreciate that as well. What first got you into education, into the field?
Yeah, well, my first life, I was going to be a college basketball coach. So I wanted to be like Rick Pitino. Was my goal to be a college basketball coach. And I coached in college for 4 years as an assistant coach at Eastern Kentucky University. And then I just wanted my own team. And so I had a teaching certification here in Kentucky. My parents had moved. I didn't grow up in Louisville, but my parents had moved back here. And so I just looked for a head coaching job here in JCPS. There was one open at Shawnee High School. I took the job, coached for about 2 or 3 more years before I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I had a mentor of mine tap me on the shoulder and say, you know what, you should be a principal. You'd be pretty good at that. So I went back to school to be a principal. I eventually got a principal job at J-Town High School for 8 years and then Doss High School for 2 years. And then I was not expecting to be superintendent. And then was asked to apply for the job by the board. I did and got the job and dove into it. So it was not my goal to be superintendent, but it ended up, as you all will all find out, is you work hard, you do things the right way, your path will lead you to someplace unexpected at times, but very important. So this is kind of like what I consider my calling, my life's calling was to be superintendent in JCPS. So it kind of led me here, but it was really going through the principal ranks that led me here.
Wow. So I would say most people know the responsibilities of a teacher and maybe a principal, but I don't think most people understand what a superintendent does on a day-to-day basis, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so it's really difficult to explain because you are essentially what it is. It's the same thing as a CEO of a large corporation.
Right.
And so you're really over everything. And so, I am, we have over a $2 billion budget in JCPS because we have 155 schools. And so, that's a big part is managing that budget. We have 17,000 employees. So I am the only one legally who's allowed to hire or terminate any employee. So that's a big part of my job. I think a huge part of my job is managing each division. So the people who directly report to me are the heads of each division. So we have a chief of human resources and a chief of operations. So human resources does all the hiring, operations, does everything from facilities, fixing things in schools, to transportation, to food services. We have a chief academic officer who does all the things academic based. We have a chief financial officer who does the budget. So my job is to really oversee that leadership team to make sure we are effectively implementing it. And then a lot of times making tough decisions, what I take to the Board of Education. We can do things like student assignment, like where do you live in this house? What school do you go to? We have to manage that on a regular basis so that we try to. So it is really comprehensive. And I think the biggest part is I am kind of the face of the district, and I have to be the spokesperson for the district. Where I'm the one who, when things are going good, I've got to stand up and celebrate, and when things are not going good, I have to stand up and take responsibility for that. And so, not an easy job, but an important one.
So it seems like throughout your life, you kind of stayed in this, well, at least in some sense of leadership and leadership roles that have a lot of responsibility, like we talked about. How do you manage that responsibility in terms of like even with stress and stuff? Because that is a whole lot of responsibility on you.
Yeah, it is. The stress is huge, and I had incredible stress as a principal, and so as a principal, as your principal could probably tell you, you come to school every day hoping that it's a great day, but you're having 1,000 kids and teenagers in a school building, and you have probably 100 adults in a school building, and so anything can happen on a day. We know that from national news. Anything can happen, and so it's a lot of stress being responsible for 1,000 students and 100 adults and making sure things go well. And it's the same as superintendent. I mean, I feel like I'm responsible for 97,000 students and 17,000 employees every day. I think the thing that makes you have to have your why you're doing something. And so I'm not doing this. I get paid well, but I'm not doing this for a paycheck. I'm not doing this because I want fame or people to know me when I go out. The reason I'm doing this is because I care for JCPS. I've been in it for 28 years. My mom was a JCPS teacher. My dad was a JCPS basketball coach and teacher. My daughter went through JCPS for 12 years. And so when you say my why is because I care about this community and especially this school district, then it becomes you have much more ability to take on the stress and say, yeah, this is a tough job. And sometimes I go home and frazzled and, upset. But in the end, my job is to support the school district. So, and my recommendation to anyone that when you have a job, you have a why. Why am I doing this? What is my purpose for this? And when you have that, you're able to manage the stress.
Thank you so much. And for the next student question, Ben, you want to take that?
I will. Thank you. How does it feel being the superintendent, and what's your favorite part about the job? That's a question from two of our students here, Kiana and Emmanuel, who are both juniors.
Yeah. So repeat that again for me, please. The first part.
Yeah. Okay. How does it feel being the superintendent, and what's your favorite part about it?
Yeah, it feels it's a job that is very heavy on your shoulders. I'm very proud to be representing JCPS. I can't imagine doing this job in another city where I didn't go, like just moving to another city and being superintendent, where I didn't know. I mean, when I was a basketball coach, I coached at Valley High School. Now, it wasn't the new gym. It was the old gym. We still have the old gym, I guess, here.
Yeah, we do.
But that's where I coached. So I coached against Valley. The coach of Valley, I can remember like yesterday, Fred Copas. And so coached here for many, many years. And so I remember that very well. But so I have a history in this district. When I come to Valley, I think about that, like when I coached here and, when I was a principal and we played here. And so, but it is very heavy on your shoulders. I mean, you have 155 schools and anything can go wrong any day. And I am responsible to stand up for whatever happens and say, once again, this great thing happened or this very difficult thing happened. And so that is probably the biggest weight on a superintendent. So it is heavy responsibility, but it's very important. And I'll say my favorite part, once again, without doubt, is just interacting with kids. I wish I got to do it more. I don't get to do it as often as I like to because of the job responsibilities. Like I said, I have to manage the leadership team at JCPS, and so I'm meeting with them most of the time, making decisions. I have to do a lot of public facing things where I go out into the community to represent JCPS. So I don't get in schools as much as I like, but whenever I get to interact with kids, I love it.
Yes, and to add on to that question, what was the hardest decision that you had to make?
There were several. The hardest decisions I had to make that you all probably remember was around COVID. And so during that time, it was very controversial because it was either kids aren't in school and they're not learning what they need to, and you're negatively impacting their life, or you're threatening the health of students, families, and teachers. And so it was, and I've never been in something that it was almost so 50-50, like where kids need to be back in school right now. And on the other hand, you're risking the lives of students, staff, family members who may be vulnerable. So just every decision that came around about that, and it became so political, as you know, was just a difficult one to decide what to do. So keeping kids out of school for a while was very difficult. When I made the determination we needed to go back to school, I got a lot of heat from that as well, from people who thought we were risking the lives and people weren't happy. Two, whether students had to wear masks or not in school. You all remember that? I mean, the last thing we wanted to do was have students have to wear masks, but we also were concerned about, so that was a very difficult one. And then the other one was last spring when we had to make a decision. We just don't have enough bus drivers and had to make a decision about transportation to magnet schools. So our magnet schools right now, so Valley clearly has transportation,
Yeah.
but our magnet schools do not. And so, that was a very difficult and hard decision to make. But I don't know if you all were impacted by it as much last year, but last year and the year before, kids were getting late to school because buses were late. They may not even be showing up at some time to houses because we were so short bus drivers. So I had to make a decision that I thought was best for kids, which was kids can't be missing school because buses are late. We got to every minute counts in school. And so I made that decision. So those were the two hardest decisions I had to make.
Thank you.
Yes. So for the next question, this is from Gloria Jr. And how do you decide what changes to make in schools? Just, I guess, broadly in a sense.
Yeah.
So, like, when we're looking at issues and stuff.
So I think one of the things that we try to do, it's hard sometimes in such a large district, is to collaborate with others. So I don't want it to be just I'm making a decision. And so it is important for me to hear from the people that it impacts the most. So trying to talk to students and hearing student voice, hearing teacher voice. So we have some ways that we collaborate officially with teachers, principals. We have some ways that we hear from principals and families as well too. So trying to take all of that input in. Now, at the end, someone has to make a decision. And many times, unfortunately, that's me. I have to make the decision of what that. And often, and almost always, the Board of Education has to approve that decision. So I make recommendations, then the board has to approve that almost everything that I do outside of HR. So our budget, all of these allocations to schools, student assignment, all of these, the bus decision, the COVID decisions, all of them, I make a recommendation and the board approves that or does not. So I have to collaborate with them closely. And so, I think leadership requires the ability to listen to others, take that input, and then try to make the best decision or recommendation to our board for all kids in the district. And so, like the magnet school, yes, we have 14,000 kids in magnets that we want to give transportation to, but we have 82,000 kids who aren't in magnet schools. And I've got to make sure they get to school on time. And so I've got to make the recommendation that I think is best for all kids. And sometimes that's hard. For instance, like the voices of families at magnet schools are a lot louder sometimes than in our reside schools. And so, but I can't let that influence what I think is best. So I think collaboration is huge, and then having the courage to make a tough decision that you think what's best for kids.
Wow. Thank you so much for the answer.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, next question is from Allison. She's a sophomore. What measures are being taken to improve the safety or well-being of students?
Yeah, great question, Allison. I mean, I will say this, that so in 2019, we were really struggling with safety in schools. I'll give an example. And that when came out of COVID, we're struggling with it. In 2023, we had 28 guns in schools that were taken off of students. And so we had to look at that. But we also wanted to improve our safety. in schools. So, as you know, we've done a lot of things. First of all, we built our own police department. And so we have our own police department now that has about 70 police officers that are the JCPS Police Department. That if there is a need in the school or just to come by and support, we have our police department. We now have what's called safety. You have a safety administrator here at your school who focuses all their energy and time on safety. So they may not be doing books and evaluating teachers and all of these things, but they are focused on safety. Then, as you know, we have the evolved technology. When you walk in the door of the school, you have to go through weapons detection now. On the other side of that coin is support. So in the past 5 years, we've added mental health professionals to all schools. So you all have an MHP here in your school that you can see if needed. We've also added some other supports around mental health for kids, access to some tools that we can support our kids. So I think in the past 3 or 4 years, we have had an amazing increase in safety at schools. That doesn't mean that something can't happen at a school. We see it all over the nation, but we do everything we can to try to prevent that.
Okay, I really appreciate that question. It seems like we're running short on time. And to send it off, though.
You could, whatever you want to ask, if you want a question or two more.
Okay.
So it's up to you.
Can we keep going?
Sure. Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's not my timekeeper.
From Tyrion, who's a junior, why did the starting time for schools, at least certain schools, change?
So a tough question there. And really what it came down to, well, and I have a belief that, and research supports this, first of all, that high school and middle school kids shouldn't be going as early as 7:30 in the morning, because the research is clear that high school students, you all stay up late, no matter when time is to wake up in the morning, and you're not getting enough sleep. And it is impacting mental health. It is impacting student performance. It's impacting all kinds of things. And so I've had a goal all along was to move at least back an hour our high schools. But what really precipitated the need to change times was the fact that we only had 2 start times in the district. So for decades, middle and high started at 7:40 and elementary started at 9 o'clock. If we only have 2 start times, it requires about 950 buses to get all of our kids to school. If we have 3 start times, because it's spread out now over 3 start times, we only need about 700 bus routes. And so going from 2 to 3, and we only have about 650 bus drivers right now. So having 2 start times and needing 850, 900 routes was impossible. So we had to change start times mainly to make sure we could transport kids to school.
Right. So, but there is, at least I've noticed, there's a distinction between certain schools. Some still start at 7:20. I think we start at 8:40. How do you determine what certain, even high schools, have their start times?
Yeah, so that's a difficult question. That was a real challenge. So we took most of our magnet schools because we have what are called depots. If any of you have ever been on a bus with a depot, which means they all go to one. Now, most of your buses are probably direct buses. You get on the bus, it drops you off at school. But if you go to a magnet, you got to get on a bus, you got to go to another stop, get off of that bus, and get on another bus. So we put all of those at the first start time. And then the second and third start time are all direct runs, meaning you get on a bus, it takes you right to your school, which are most of our resides. But I know our board is very interested in possibly looking at elementaries all going first and then middle and highs going second and third. That won't be for next year, but it could be down the line. But it's a very tough issue,
right?
Because everyone has their preferred start time, and anytime you make big change, it's going to be hard. You're moving a whole lot of people to something they're not used to. So that's kind of how we made that decision.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess sleep schedules too do change as well.
Yep, that is correct.
All right, this one's from Ian. He's a sophomore. Why is it complicated to solve teachers and bus drivers shortages?
Well, it's a real lack of people, and so I think the difficult part of, first of all, with teachers, there is about half as many young people going to college to become a teacher as there was 15 years ago. And we can all debate, why is that? Why are less people going into teaching than that? And you all could probably answer that more than I could, which is, you all are about to make decisions about, what am I going to do for a career? And so, I mean, I think the question for young people, and I would ask is, you can think about this, but why are less people going into teaching than they did 15 years ago? And so there's a lot to it. I think pay is a big part of it. The challenge that we put on teachers now in the classroom, that, it's not just about teaching content. It's about, providing all the things that kids need. We have so many kids in poverty. We have so many kids with mental health needs. And the teachers are the ones that have to deal with that on a daily basis. So maybe that's it, but it is a national issue. And when you have that many teachers not going into teaching, and clearly the retired people are starting to retire, and there's less teachers going into the field. So it's going to be a real issue for a long time to come. I have real concerns about what school is going to look like in 10 years if the trend continues. And then bus drivers for us, I mean, what bus drivers have to get is a CDL, which is the ability to drive a bus or a truck, or a UPS or Amazon. And we pay very well for bus drivers, better than anyone around. But in the end, if you get your CDL, it's difficult to drive 60 kids around. It's difficult. Probably a lot easier to drive around a truck full of boxes and drop them off at a front porch than it is to take 60 teenagers or small kids. You're driving the bus and trying to keep 60. I mean, I tell parents this all the time. When you drive to Florida and you have 3 kids in the back seat, it's hard to control that, much less 60 kids on a bus. So it's just a challenge. And there's so many ways now that someone can get a CDL, and then I'll go work for Amazon or UPS, or I'll drive a truck, or, any of these things that pay about the same. That for many people, it's just a job that they think is probably less stressful.
Right. Okay, so for the next question.
Okay, this will be the last
one. Okay, last question by Lola Grace, a junior, and Asan, a senior. Can you share a memorable moment during your career that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I'm proud of a lot of things, but I'll tell you the one story that kind of made me so proud, that showed me the impact of what we do. And it's a little small story that I tell often. But as a result of being superintendent, people recognize me a lot out in the community. And so that's good. Sometimes it's bad sometimes. But I was in a CVS when I first got the superintendent job. And this mom came up to me and said, Dr. Pollio, do you remember me? And I said, yeah, when you've been in it this long, for 30 years, and you've had thousands of teachers and probably 100,000 kids you've dealt with, and my age, you start to think, like, I can't even picture how old you are, much less, but I usually say, refresh me. And she said, my son went to J-Town when you were the principal there. And I said, okay. And she said, I want to tell you what you did for us, how important it was. And I said, so what did I do? And she said, well, my son was really struggling in school. He was one of these kids we couldn't keep in school. So he was always trying to run out the back door and, leave school and cut class. And so we were really struggling. He just did not want to go to class. I know there are no Valley Vikings who would ever cut class, which is great. But his mom came in and she said, I'm really struggling with him. He won't stay in school. He's having problems outside of school. I don't know what to do. And I said, come on in my office. And we sat down and we talked to her for a while. And then we called her son down and we talked to him for about an hour. And I'd like to say, like, overnight he changed, but slowly he started getting better. And so I said, how's he doing now? And she said, he's in his mid-20s and he's doing great. He's a dad and he's got a job. And she said, you talking to him made all the difference in the world to change his life. And I'll be honest, I don't even remember that meeting. I don't even remember doing that. It is just a part of one of the things you do every single day. And so I tell educators all the time that, you are changing someone. Every time you interact with a kid is a chance to change their life, and you don't even know it. And you may not even know it for 10 or 20 years down the road, or you may not ever know it. But like, that's how important this work is when you have the chance to. I could have easily blown the mother off and said, I don't have time. The assistant principal can talk to you or the counselor. And it also scares me to think about how many times maybe I didn't do that. Like, was I grumpy, or I was mad at another kid and I walked by someone else that I had a chance and I just kind of blew them off. And so, I really learned that every chance you have to change a kid's life is an opportunity you have to take advantage of. So that was just kind of a moment for me that I realized 30 years in this business is like, boy, yeah, and hopefully did change a lot of lives.
Wow. That story kind of makes me want to be a teacher.
Good. I like that.
Yeah,
I like
telling me we're going to have a shortage anymore.
I like that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming out.
Guys, great interview. Appreciate you all so much.
It's great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. You too. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.